for being here today. I want to start out by throwing out a number 285. 285. And I don't know what that means to y'all, but it's quite a big number. If we had 285 people in this room, we could see what that number represents. But for me and for us in the United States, 285 represents the number of youth and young adults that died of an opioid overdose in 2017. 285 every month. 285 15 to 24-year-old young people and youth died from an opioid overdose. And that was an average over the 2017. We don't have the numbers yet for 2018, but I'm expecting that would be even higher for 2018. So that's 285 a month of our future leaders, future doctors, future city workers, nurses, moms, dads that aren't here anymore because of that. So that's why we're here. I am with Speak Up About Drugs. My name's Paula Cunningham. I'm an RN. I work at Arkansas Blue Cross and Blue Shield, and I'm also a board member of Speak Up About Drugs. Okay. So why Speak Up? I just told you, 285, right? Speak Up About Drugs is a statewide coalition with members who have lived experience through either a loss of their own child, children or families currently struggling with substance abuse, or they're actually living in recovery themselves. Speak Up About Drugs was started by Gina Algair, who lost her own son to an opioid overdose, an accidental opioid overdose. And so we basically go around, share our stories, educate, inform, and we're using our voice to offer prevention and advocacy support across Arkansas as we work towards zero addiction and zero overdose in Arkansas. So there you go, my own personal story. So I have my own personal story. I lost my own son, Parker Gill. I lost him on August 29th, 2018 due to an accidental opiate overdose. So who was Parker? Parker was a normal child. He could have been anyone's child. He was respectful. Something I always admired about him or loved about him, he would say, yes, sir, no, sir, and yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. He would shake your hand like he was a grown man, even as a young child. He would open the door for me and any other woman. I always loved that about him. He was, like I said, a normal child. He loved the outdoors. He loved to hunt and fish. He loved to duck call. He was actually a very skilled duck caller. Parker had a good heart. I love looking at those pictures of him. He graduated from Robinson High School, and he was very proud when he graduated, because when he graduated, he had already gone through a treatment program for his substance use disorder, and he started very early on, and so he graduated after going through one treatment program. He thought he never would graduate, and I was very proud of him. So that's why I have that picture there. It's pretty special to me. But somewhere along the line, Parker, when he was pretty young, was offered a pill. A pill someone gave him, told him it would make him feel good. And he thought maybe it would, and he thought maybe it'd make him cool. I don't know exactly what he was thinking, but in my mind, that's what I see him thinking, thought it would make his problems go away. And that was a choice he made very early on. But soon after that, it was no longer a choice for him. He had to have that drug to make it through the day. And he worked very hard to overcome his addiction. He worked very hard and didn't want to be that way. I've sat with him many times crying, saying, I just want to be normal. I want to be the normal son, the son, the brother, the uncle that you all deserved, the grandson. He loved his family. The drugs often took him away from his family, but he did love his family dearly, and it bothered him that he couldn't be that son that he wanted to be. So he worked really hard, and before he died, he had gone through 2 more treatment programs and was doing well, living in a chem-free, sober home in Monroe, Louisiana, and doing well. I had talked to him a couple of days before, but for some reason, he got in his car, his truck, and drove to Little Rock, bought drugs, got a motel room, and he used, and he died. We don't know for sure, but we suspect that it was laced with fentanyl, and we'll talk more about fentanyl in a little bit, but it whatever it was, caused him to overdose. He was found by the maids the next day, or at about 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. They called 911 and they rushed him to the hospital. They were able to resuscitate him, put him on a ventilator, and I was able to have about 24 hours with him before he passed away. I feel extremely blessed for that. I was able to hold his hand and sing to him and just be there with him. The other amazing thing is that he was an organ donor. He had mentioned many times throughout his young life that he wanted to be an organ donor. If anything ever happened to him, give his organs to someone to save someone else's life. And so we were able to do that. And he was able to donate both his kidneys to 2 men here in Central Arkansas, and they now have life because of him. So that's amazing, and I do thank God for that as well. Another blessing. So I just want to talk today about the opioids and the epidemic. If I can do this right. There we go. So what are opioids? We hear opioids and opiates. What are they? Basically, an opiate is a naturally occurring drug derived from the poppy plant. So that's heroin, morphine, codeine. An opioid is a broader term that includes both natural and synthetic drugs that bind to opioid receptors in the brain. And I'll break that down a little bit later in simpler terms, but opioids are a class of drugs that include prescription pain relievers such as codeine, morphine, synthetic opioids. That's oxycodone. We all have heard of that. OxyContin, Roxy is a common name for it. Hydrocodone, Vicodin, Percocet, fentanyl, and tramadol. And then we also have the illegal opiate heroin. So a lot of those, Percocet, very commonly prescribed for different procedures, dental procedures. I may have it in your cabinet. But they're very, very highly addictive substances. 197 people die each day in the U.S. from overdose. 197, there's another big number each day from overdose. 147 of those are from opioids. Over 72,000 died of overdose in 2017. Opioids were involved in 47,600 overdose deaths. Here's a big number too. Estimated cost of the opioid epidemic in 2015 was $504 billion. So it's very costly. What are the effects of the opioids on labor force? It affects all of us. Well, of course, workers are less productive on opioids. If they're using while they're working, they're less productive. Employers in opioid-affected areas have difficulty finding dependable workers and filling job openings. Working-age adults who have an addiction to opioids are often absent from the labor work. You can imagine it would be hard to come to work if you are dependent on an opioid. Nearly half of prime-age men who are not in the labor force take pain medicine daily. Of those taking pain medicine, 2/3 use prescription painkillers. So what happened? There we go. In the late 1990s, pharmaceutical companies reassured the medical community that patients would not become addicted to prescription opioid pain relievers. Pharmaceutical companies had this great new drug. They pushed it out. There was a big push. I remember in the early 90s when I was starting out nursing, we had these pain scale cards, 0 to 10, and it was a big push for us to make sure our patients were 0 or as far down on that pain scale as we could. And we were to give as much pain medication as we could. And so the pharmaceutical companies reassured the doctors that, hey, this is not addictive. Use it. Make sure your patients are pain-free. So healthcare providers began to prescribe them at greater rates and for longer periods of time. Overprescribing led to widespread diversion. Diversion, that means I've got my bottle of pills and I don't really need them, but I found out that someone else could use these. And I also found out I could make a lot of money with this bottle of pills. So I'm going to sell it to somebody and they're going to sell it to somebody. And so that's what diversion is. And it led to that. We all had extra. We all had extra in our cabinets. And you could get it for just about anything. So roughly 25% of patients prescribed opioids for chronic pain misuse them. They get them, they keep taking them, they don't need them anymore, and they misuse them. Maybe they take more than what they're prescribed. And about 10% develop an opioid use disorder. An estimated 4 to 6% who misuse prescription opioids then transition to heroin. What happens is you become dependent upon your opioid, then you go to your doctor and you can't get any more. And so then you go and you can find heroin on the street for a lot less. So you transition to your heroin, or maybe that opioid doesn't work as well for you. And so then you transition to heroin. Opioid overdose rates continued to increase. From 1999 to 2017, almost 400,000 people died from an opioid overdose. The rise in opioid overdose can be outlined in 3 waves. We've got the 1990s prescribing, like I'd already talked about, and then in 2010, a rapid increase in overdose involving heroin started happening. People started transitioning to heroin. And in 2013, significant increase in overdose deaths involving synthetic opioids. There's your fentanyl. Fentanyl's cheaper to bring over. It's stronger. So they start putting fentanyl in fake oxy, and they put it in heroin, and it's stronger, and they're able to sell more, and it kills. In 2017, more than 47,000 Americans died as a result of an opioid overdose. I may have already said that, but that's just astounding. Like I said before, in 2018, the numbers are probably going to be greater. We don't have those in yet. So what's fentanyl? I think I'm behind on my slides. There we go. Fentanyl. Sorry about that. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid pain reliever. It's 50 to 100 times stronger than heroin. It's often mixed with heroin, cocaine, and other illicit drugs. Roughly 28,400 people, more numbers, died from overdoses involving synthetic opioids other than methadone in 2017. And if you look at the picture, you see heroin on the left. That's the amount of heroin it takes to kill someone. And if you look on the right, that's the amount of fentanyl it takes to kill someone. Very, very little. We could all be unawares. Very important to know. So who's at risk of opioid addiction or overdose? I say we all are. All of us. Opioids don't discriminate. It affects all age groups, all males and females, or affects males and females. It affects income levels and social classes across the board. It affects all races and religions. Doesn't matter. And most importantly, it isn't a moral failing. It's a medical disorder that can afflict you or someone you know without warning. If you see over on the left, it's a tweet, I suppose, from the U.S. Surgeon General. He says, "My brother Philip is an addict, and bad parenting is often blamed for drug addiction. Well, my parents raised a Surgeon General. I think they did okay. We need to recognize that addiction is a chronic disease and not a moral failing." I'd like to talk about that a little bit more as well. So we're going to talk about opioids and pain in the brain and how that affects us. So opioids bind to and activate receptors on cells located in many areas of the brain, spinal cord, and other organs in the body, especially those involved in feelings of pain and pleasure. So opioids are little receptors throughout our nervous system, in our brain, our spinal cord, and I like to think of it as a little golf tee, okay? So opioid receptors are in our brain and throughout the body, and when opioids attach to these receptors, they block pain signals. So you have your little opioid floating around, and it attaches to the receptor, and that's going to block your pain signal. But what it also does is it releases a large amount of dopamine. So dopamine is that feel-good chemical in our body. It's like when you eat a piece of pizza, our body releases the dopamine and it tells us this is good, okay? We remember that. We always remember pizza's good, or maybe ice cream, Reese's chocolate Easter eggs. That's in my mind right now. So our bodies release dopamine naturally. So when that heroin or that opiate, whatever it is, attaches to that receptor, large amounts, it just floods our body. And you feel so good, and your brain remembers that. They found that it actually changes, your brain when that dopamine rushes out. You never forget that, and you always want to come back to that. It can strongly reinforce the act of taking the drug, making the user want to repeat it over and over. So what are some possible effects of prescription opioids on the brain and body? They can relieve pain, make people feel relaxed and happy, but they can also cause drowsiness, confusion, nausea, constipation, euphoria, and slowed breathing. Opioid misuse can cause slowed breathing, which can cause hypoxia, which is your body not getting enough oxygen. That's what happened with my son. When he took whatever it was that he took, he laid on the floor without oxygen too long, and his brain went without oxygen, and he had damage to his brain that was irreversible. You can have short and long-term psychological and neurological effects, including coma, permanent brain damage, or death. So what can you do? That's the most important. What can we do to help eliminate addiction and overdose? Well, most who abuse opioids get them from family members. I told you earlier that, overprescribing led to some of this. And so a lot of us have these in our cabinets. Our grandparents may have them in our cabinets. Fentanyl is used to treat cancer. There's a lot of opioids that are used to treat cancer, so you may have a family member who has a lot left over. So it's important for us to keep those locked up, keep them away, and those that are left over, let's dispose of them. The Arkansas Drug Take Back has a program where twice a year they actually have sites all over the Arkansas area where you can go and dispose of your drugs. April 27th is our next Arkansas Drug Take Back Day. You can go to their website, www.artakeback.org, and look up the different areas. There'll be several in our area here in Little Rock, North Little Rock, Bryant, Sherwood, where you can go and dispose of those so that they're not out there. What happens is, you know, your grandchild or your child may bring friends over and they're really skilled at opening those cabinets without you even seeing them. They'll go in your restroom and find these, and then those will be on the streets to sell to someone else. So it's very important to keep those locked up. I want you to be informed, be prepared, and speak up. So ask your pharmacist to inform you about your prescriptions and get specific directions on taking any type of opioid. They say about 3 days is really all you need it. Ask them how long. Don't just keep taking it, because the longer you take it, the easier it is for you to become dependent on that opioid. Ask them for non-addictive alternatives if you're in need of a pain reliever. If opioids are the only option, like I said, take them only as directed, but for the least period of time possible.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, you're basically saying that yes, the people should make the choice of saying we're not going to take this for an extended period of time. Why is the doctor not going back and saying, okay, I'm only going to give you this much instead of over prescribing so much?
Right.
Because, I mean, it seems like it should stop at the head instead of saying, okay, now you're supposed to control it, but they have the ultimate control because they're writing the prescription. So is there not a regulation out there?
Yes, and I will speak to that a little bit, okay? She asked the question, if you're not supposed to, or we're talking about taking them for the least amount of time, why shouldn't your doctor tell you that? And yes, I do believe that they should, and we are doing education. Arkansas is doing education across the board, and that is going on across the United States as well, to physicians, to offer alternatives, to explain to you when, you know, you need to stop taking that, or to warn you that if you take it for longer periods of time, it will make you, or it could make you dependent, and to warn you of the severe addictive potential of that drug. So we have, you know, education across the board to do, and that's part of, you know, what's going on in Arkansas today, to educate everyone about this. And kind of, does that help a little bit? I mean, but right now what you can do is, and that's where Speak Up comes in, to educate you, so that when you go to the doctor, you can say, hey doc, I heard that there is an opioid epidemic going on, and I heard that only a short period of time after taking this, I could become dependent, or even cause me to have a substance use disorder and a dependence on this. Can you talk to me about that? So, I mean, that's our responsibility. And we have pamphlets. I don't have any with me today, but I can probably get some up here to you. And it talks about how to have that conversation with your doctor. Does that help? Okay. So if you or a loved one do have to be on an opioid, there's timer caps that you can get. They're a great way to help you take your prescription as directed and ensure that no one else is taking your pills. They're little timer caps. Put them on there. You can get them usually at Walgreens or somewhere like that. And that way you set it. I'm supposed to take it every 8 hours or every 6 hours, and you'll know if someone's been in it before you have. And that's a good way too. Then there's have life-saving naloxone or Narcan on hand if you are concerned about the possibility of overdose of a loved one. What happens is naloxone or Narcan, that is a drug that reverses the effects of opioids. And if you're in an overdose situation, or if you see someone in an overdose situation, you can use Narcan to revive them. It comes in, you can see the little picture right there on the bottom. And it comes in a little box, and it's got 2 doses. You just take the apparatus and just squirt it in their nose. It's a powder that goes in their nose, a spray, and it will reverse the effects of opioids. So if you think about the T that I had earlier, the little receptor, and then you've got your opioid on the receptor, Narcan comes and knocks those off. And it's almost an immediate. They start breathing again because they have knocked that opioid off of the receptor, and they can start breathing again. I carry Narcan with me at all times. It's very easy to use. It won't harm the person if it's not an opioid that caused them to start breathing. And so our state has actually been providing those to first responders, and they're going to start with schools. And Arkansas Blue Cross and the Blue and You Foundation has given the state grants for that. So I'm really, really proud of our state for going and doing that. We've had, Andy, can you tell me how many saves? Over 200.
We've had 230 saves.
230 saves since the Narcan program has started in our state. That's 230 lives that are saved from an opioid overdose. So I'm really excited about that. If you want to know more about it, let me know.
So is 2 sufficient? Can you ever go more than that?
Sometimes it's not sufficient. With fentanyl now, sometimes the 2 doses don't revive you from fentanyl. But most opioids, the 2 will give you at least enough time for a first responder to get there, the ambulance, fire department, and so you can get them to the hospital. All right. Treatment. Is treatment available? Absolutely. There are treatment options. We have state targeted response grant funded treatment facilities in Arkansas. You may hear it STR grant funded facilities. And they provide substance abuse treatment and medication assisted treatment. It's divided in different catchment areas. You can see that the divisions there, we've got 1, 2, 3, all the way through 8. We are located in 8. That's got Saline, Pulaski, Lone Oak, and Prairie counties. Our treatment center is Recovery Centers of Arkansas. It's located at 1201 River Road in North Little Rock. It's just right across the river from where we are now. And actually, this is, if you qualify, there are some things that you have to go through to qualify for the state funded, but if you do qualify, you can go and get treatment if you don't have insurance. You don't have a way to pay for it. The state's going to pay for that. So it's amazing. I'm very excited about Arkansas offering that. And there are different ones. I didn't put them on here, but there's different ones from different areas of the state. And again, you can find that information at the AR Takeback site. It's got all of the different treatments, state-funded treatments, as well as other treatment centers that are available in our state. So what are the types of treatment available? I'm not going to go into this in big detail, but I just kind of want you to know what's available. So if you have someone that needs treatment, you can actually talk to them about it. There is residential treatment. Residential treatment is the one where they go and they stay there. They don't leave. They spend the night there, they stay there 30, 60, 90 days, and sometimes longer. Intensive outpatient treatment is you live at home, you're staying at home, you need to work or you need to go to school, but you still need some treatment. That usually follows a residential treatment program. And so you go to your outpatient treatment and you get counseling, maybe a 12-step program during that day, and you're there several hours during the day. And then there's medication-assisted treatment. Medication-assisted treatment is medications combined with counseling and behavioral therapy to treat substance use disorders. That's Suboxone is one of them, methadone. And I just wrote a piece that they published in the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette on Sunday, and it was about the stigma related to medication-assisted treatment. There's a great stigma. People say that that's trading one drug for another. They say, oh, you'll be on that the rest of your life. But it is a valid treatment for opioid use disorder. It has been proven, there's studies that have proven that it decreases overdose It increases their quality of life. You can work. And a lot of other good things about medication-assisted treatment. There's also 12-step programs. We have Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Al-Anon. Al-Anon is for family members. I highly suggest it if you have someone, a child, a loved one, husband, wife, any other family member that is dealing with a substance use disorder. Al-Anon is amazing. It teaches you the skills that you need to deal with a loved one that is going through this. It helps you to look at yourself, because there's always something we can change. It helps you accept that responsibility that you might have that played a part in this disorder. So I'm a big proponent of that. And then Celebrate Recovery. Celebrate Recovery is a 12-step, it's a faith-based 12-step program. We have them throughout the state as well. So, stop the stigma. I talked about that earlier. What is stigma? Stigma is a mark of disgrace, a stain, reproach. It's treating that person like they are disgraced. Substance use disorders carry a high burden of stigma. It keeps us from talking about it. That fear of judgment often hinders people with substance use disorders to seek help. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to reach out. They feel like there's this big cloud. You know, family members feel that way too. And two main factors that affect that burden of stigma involve perceived control that a person has over the condition and perceived fault in acquiring that condition. So we look at the person suffering from substance use disorder and we say they can control it and they're at fault. But what we found is that substance use disorder is a disorder. It's an illness. It's a disease. And we got to think. We got to look at the way we think about things so that we're not hindering their ability to seek treatment. It influences health outcomes and mental well-being. And so there's arguments. People sometimes still don't feel that it is a disease. And they feel like someone did cause it, or they could control it. Maybe it is their fault. But if we treat it that way, that hinders their ability to seek treatment and to seek help. So those that have experienced that, or they expect to experience, we found through studies that it actually affects their outcomes and their ability to do well in treatment. So what can we do? We can be aware. We can just think, do I have that? Do I think that about people when I see them? Because yeah, they may, like I said, they may have made that first choice. Now I can take an opiate and that may not do that to me. But at some point, they don't have a choice because they don't want to be that way. My son didn't want it. He said, what can I do? And he would go to treatment and he would relapse. He overdosed 3 times. He would go to treatment and he would relapse. And he drove himself home from the ER one day and said, Mom, what can I do? I got to go back. And I got to see what I'm not doing or see what I'm doing wrong. He didn't want it. And then I hope that story will make you think differently when you see somebody that's dealing with this. Not that the behaviors that go along with it sometimes we have to condone, but maybe they don't want to be that way. And maybe they want help and they just don't know how to get that help. And is there something I can do by the way I treat them or talk to them that might help them? Be aware. Check your language. Use first-person language. A person suffering with a substance use disorder. A person suffering with an opioid use disorder, there are languages that we can use. Or a person struggling with alcoholism or addiction, rather than junkie or that addict. There's things that we can say differently. So think about your language. I have to think about mine still. So avoid using labels such as addict, drug abuser, junkie. That all increases the stigma. Oops. Excuse me, we're going to go back one more. So speak up about drugs. Courageous conversations. There's some conversations that we can all have with people that we encounter. Talk to your children and loved ones about the dangers of opioids. Let them know it's out there. If you have kids, people, high school, elementary, even elementary, but I meant to say junior high school, let them know. They're putting fentanyl and marijuana, Xanax, cocaine, methamphetamines, heroin. The drugs on the street are laced with fentanyl. Let them know that. Let them know how highly addicted opiates are. Give them realistic examples of way to say, no, I'm good. No, it's okay. Give them reasons to refuse. I've got a little pamphlet I'd like to give you if you have young children, and it gives little cool things to say. And that's a good conversation to start with your child. And start young, because they're starting young nowadays, and they need to be prepared to say no. If you're concerned about another's drug use, speak up and encourage them to seek treatment. Don't be afraid. If you take that stigma away and you see that person as a person who's struggling, then you may not be afraid to say, hey, I see what's been going on. Do you need help? Because I know where you can get help. And if you need help, let me know. Don't be afraid to speak up. Address the root cause of the drug use if not a result of surgery or other medical problems. Just talk to them about why they're using. And then don't run Call 911, the Joshua Ashley Pauley Act. That's a law here in Arkansas that states that you're not going to, if you call 911, if someone is with a friend or someone else and they're using and one of the person's overdoses, you can call 911 so that they can get help and you won't be prosecuted. They won't prosecute you for using as well. There are some stipulations to the bill. I believe that if you were actually selling it to that person or something to that effect, then you could become in trouble for that. But learn about that law. Know that it's out there. Let people know. I was talking not too long ago with someone that was using and had never heard of it. There's people out there that still don't know that, and it might save a life. Familiarize yourself and educate the children on the signs of overdose. Shallow breathing, limp or lifeless. That sounds like a no-brainer, but it's true. If you know that someone's using and you see them laying on the couch and they look like they're limp or lifeless, call 911. Vomiting, blue lips, snoring. I wouldn't call it for your husband if you know he's not using, but it is a sign, right? And then gurgling sound, that's a big one. Gurgling breathing. Call 911. Let's see. And I believe that's it. Speak up about drugs to save lives. Hashtag no drugs, no overdoses. That's what we would like to see, and that's what we try to do. If you want more resources and more information, you can go to our website. It's www.speakupaboutdrugs.org. And that's it. I thank you all for coming today. Do we want to do a few questions? Yay!